dominated Newcastle's inflatable rescue boat title is held at Dixon Park Beach. Nobby's crews mastered the conditions and proved too slick for the 8 other clubs. Nobby's 29 points, more than double that of its nearest rival. Catherine Hill Bay finished second on 12 points, Redhead third with 7 points. In hockey, South and North played a 2-all draw in the NBN Soccer League.
It's called slide aerobics, the newest way to firm those thighs and trim that bottom. More than 35 people trialled it in Newcastle this morning, with most getting into the groove within half an hour. It simulates the movements of skiing and skating by harnessing the reduction in friction of vinyl on vinyl. The sliding action exercises the whole lower body, without the stress on joints of other aerobic workouts.
The legs are the main thing that it works at, but the postural muscles are the other things, the abdominals, the erector spinae, the glutes, and our old buttocks, that is.
The routine has already glided to the top of gyms in America, and it's set to do the same here.
It's an interesting concept. I think it's going to be a great idea once it starts going. It's going to be good for the thighs, build the thighs right up.
It's great. It's really good.
The 15.2 metre or 50 footer was secured in preparation for the more than 300 kilometre journey from Nowra to Newcastle. It's spent the last 10 weeks being built to withstand the roughest waves, but its first test would not be on the water, but on the back of a trailer for the 12-hour trip north. Today, the Newcastle Australia was slowly manoeuvred into its dry berth at Newcastle Harbour. This is about as slow as the yacht will go. Once fitted with keel and mast next week, it'll fly over the water. It's the dream boat of 31-year-old Alan Neighbour, who has worked solidly on the project since deciding to enter the race 4 years ago.
Oh, it's just been flat out, it's been a lot of hard work, but we've had a lot of good supporters, so it's been fantastic, really.
The shell weighs 2.5 tonnes, and when fully equipped it'll only be 6 tonnes, but a special seal will protect it from the worst possible conditions.
We've got Kevlar on the inner skin of the boat, which gives it very, very high impact resistance, and theoretically I could peel the outer laminate off and still keep afloat just from the strength of that 2mm laminate inside the boat.
The yacht will set sail for the United States early next month, with the BOC single-handed race, which covers 48,000 kilometres, to start from Charleston in South Carolina in September. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
It was one of those gut-wrenching games, the Blues winning the first 79 minutes, then losing on the bell.
To describe the feeling at the end was just like I'd been robbed, I felt pretty empty. But it didn't take long to sink in because the Queenslanders were pretty happy.
Right from the start, the Blues threw the ball around, Harrigan and Roberts ran decoys, and New South Wales was cutting Queensland to shreds. But the Chief was to get a few touches of the ball, one play in particular.
It's the Chief from Newcastle who's got the try.
It was Harrigan's 5th try for the season. Last year he scored just 2, the season before 0. Not that the Chief is having any fancy ideas about joining the backs.
If you have a look at big tries, there's not too many of them over about 5 metres.
Meanwhile, Harrigan's other bookend in the Knights pack, Mark Sargent, will meet with Newcastle officials in 3 weeks to decide his future. Sargent's contract is up this year. He has already had offers from 2 other clubs in Sydney and 1 in England. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Shortly before midday, 2 25-litre drums containing a dangerous substance used in manufacturing polyurethane fell off a delivery truck at the intersection of South and Lake Roads, Windale. After covering the spill with an absorbent called stone dust, the truck driver called in emergency services to complete the mopping up operation. Fire officers say the chemical has the potential to cause respiratory problems if inhaled by humans. Fortunately, however, this spill was not large enough to pose a threat. Meanwhile, fire crews were busy in bushland near the Newcastle Gun Club at Merriweather. In conjunction with the National Parks and Wildlife Service, the officers were carrying out the first in a series of hazard reduction operations throughout the Newcastle and Lake Macquarie areas. The controlled burn-offs are in response to the January bushfires. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Juniors from under 11s right up to under 17s are taking part with the first of the workouts at the number 1 sports ground this evening. And Darren wasn't letting anyone take it easy. As well, he's visiting various schools in the area to keep the juniors on track with the fundamentals of the game.
I just get the basics right. Make sure the kicking and handballing right and the tackling skills are up to scratch and just all the little things that go along with the game, just sort them out.
The 23-year-old from Albury, in his 4th season with the Swans, has had injury worries but is approaching top form, and after last weekend's success against Melbourne is looking forward to the West Coast Eagles on Friday night.
It'll be a tough assignment over there. It's a long trip over and it's very hard to win in Perth, but I think we can give them a shake.
Tonight, though, his mind was on making certain that the Swans are assured of a long-term future.
Let's go.
Graham Asbury has lived at this Mayfield house in Bull Street for the last 6 years. In the last 2 years, he's noticed a dramatic increase in industrial fallout, which has stained his house with black soot. But Graham says it's not hard to see the cause of the problem, the big Australian less than 1 kilometre from his front door. Residue has blanketed the house, with every nook and cranny covered with the hard-to-remove soot. Graham's approached BHP to get his house cleaned, but he claims all he's got in return is a "sorry, we can't help you."
Actually, they sent me a letter back, and on the letter they said 2 lines, sorry for your problems, and about 15 or 16 lines about what they're doing about the problem. Nothing about my place.
What's made Graham angrier is the big Australian's claim that it's cleaned up its act with the release of an $18 million environment package last week.
Well, they're trying to clean up their own act in their own backyard, but whatever falls out from outside their boundaries, they don't do nothing.
The company admits that the dust level in Mayfield has increased in the last few months, but says it's not to blame. Greg Cameron says the company has acknowledged that dust is emitted from the plant, but there is significant dust emitted from the highway and also other industry. This view is supported by the Environment Protection Authority, which says the big Australian can't be singled out as a sole polluter. The authority says BHP did breach some rules of its EPA licence in the last 3 months, but says they were so minor the authority won't prosecute. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The $5 million restoration of the Civic Railway workshops is expected to be finished by September this year. Now the Honeysuckle Development Corporation has called for expressions of interest from people wanting to lease the 19th century buildings. The aim is to make the Civic Precinct a meeting place where people can come to relax, eat and shop. Among the favoured uses for the railway buildings are produce markets, restaurants and cultural facilities. It's hoped these venues will attract people and money to the inner city.
The research that we've done shows that there is a great demand to have markets, to have leisure activities. This will bring what we anticipate to be thousands of people in any one week to spend money, to enjoy themselves.
Tenderers interested in developing the workshop interiors will be called and selected by the end of the year. To ensure the tenderers' concepts remain sympathetic with the Honeysuckle Corporation's ideas, a precinct plan is being considered and will be released within the next few months. The plan proposes a number of changes, among them realigning Wharf Road.
That is moving it away from the water, or part of it away from the water. That allows us to open up far more land area between the new road and the water.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
It was an eerie sight. Across Newcastle, a huge brown cloud of dust. Visibility along Stockton Beach was cut dramatically. To the west, Mount Sugarloaf was completely obscured. The wind gusts peaked at 85 kilometres an hour at 2 o'clock this afternoon. On Lake Macquarie, most yachtsmen didn't leave their moorings. It's estimated that 20 million tonnes of top-quality topsoil have come from farmlands in South Australia, only a tiny proportion from the Hunter. While the dust is an inconvenience for city dwellers, the big blow has had a multi-million-dollar effect on Australian agriculture.
Well, it means that we've lost that nutrient from the soil, so our production must decline from those areas that have lost that soil.
The soil will be dumped at sea, lost for good. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
It's hard to imagine Joanna Murphy with angle grinder or chainsaw in hand, but her exhibition, entitled Hubris, includes the fruits of 1.5 years' labour with those very instruments.
I know a few tradespeople and they always grimace at the way I use tools, because when you're doing sculpture you can't really pick a tool, it's just grabbing from here and there.
The exhibition is about man's interaction with his environment, expressed largely through Joanna's love of wood.
The beauty of wood is that you never find exactly the right shape, and that's kind of a freedom because it makes its own shape and frees up your whole work.
In the gallery next door, fellow Newcastle University students are showing off their printmaking skills. Entitled Beguiled Eye, it's a diverse collection ranging from screen prints to lithography. Both exhibitions open tonight.
Krasnopolski stands just over 15 hands high and at the age of 2 was hailed as the best around. From 5 starts he had 4 wins. Leading hunter trainer Max Lees had last year's Golden Slipper in his sights, but an untimely injury during a brief spell put paid to that. A pin was placed in Krasnopolski's knee and for the next 15 months Max supervised his recovery, organising swimming sessions and has he strengthened light track work. There were doubts as to whether Krasnopolski would perform when the pressure was on, but Max believed in him.
Well, he's a very smart horse, and I knew if he stood up he would, you know, because he's a pretty brilliant sort of horse.
Such brilliance has seen Krasnopolski win both of his starts since returning from his spell a month ago, one of these at Broadmeadow on Tuesday. Despite this, Max remains realistic about his horse's future.
Well, he'll probably never come back like he was, having an injury like that, but I still think that he'll win plenty of races. If he stays sound, he'll win plenty of races.
Max plans another provincial race for Krasnopolski before blooding him in Sydney. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The Heights private medical health centre in the grounds of the Rankin Park Hospital incorporates a restored wing of the old establishment. The $10 million complex housing the NIB Daycare Hospital was built by private investors, some of them medical consultants and specialists who'll conduct their practices there. The centre has 3 operating theatres, a large recovery centre and 20 short-stay beds. An attraction of the centre is expected to be its move into obstetrics, with 3 birthing suites and another 20 beds for new mothers.
We believe that this facility will provide an excellent source for babies. We've got 3 birthing units, as has been mentioned, postnatal facilities, general surgical ward, as well as, of course, we've transferred our day surgery operation up here.
About 40 staff will work at the NIB hospital, many transferred from the now closed Waratah Centre. In a move from Lingard Hospital, Ron Dennison has signed on as Chief Executive of the hospital, just a stone's throw from the John Hunter.
So we'll be looking for as much cooperation with the teaching hospital as possibly can be developed. And I would foreshadow that within a reasonably short period of time. We're hopeful of further extending this complex in a stage 2 development.
Around 6 last night, the helicopter was called to Wingham near Taree to recover a 28-year-old man who'd suffered a gunshot wound to the face during a shooting trip on private property. The patient was flown to Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital. The helicopter and a medical crew was then called to Coffs Harbour to pick up a badly injured motorbike rider, but en route was diverted to the scene of a car crash at Cranback near Foster. 2 adults and 2 children all suffered head and facial injuries when their car hit a tree. A 29-year-old woman had also sustained chest injuries, and a 29-year-old man in a serious condition had been trapped in the wreck. The helicopter had to be reconfigured to fit 4 stretchers, the first time the chopper has carried out such an airlift. The patients were flown to the John Hunter Hospital, and after refuelling, the helicopter continued on to Coffs Harbour on its initial call. Once back in Newcastle after 12 hours operations, the crew was again scrambled for an early morning job, but later called off.
They're right across the track. Double Take joined by Mind Blast and Arbon Rouge, who wants to get off the track. Mind Blast put his head in front of Double Take. Arbon Rouge trying to get to them. Mind Blast and Double Take, they hit the line together. Mind Blast, I think.
4, 6 and 8 were the numbers, and a bit of a turn up and a good result for the bookies. The Quinella 94.30, and I wouldn't have minded a bit of the trifecta, 2,628.60.
Described as a happy Year 7 student, Rebecca may not have known the deadly risks she was taking each time she and a few friends inhaled spray from pressurised cans for a high. They tried hairspray, this time it was fly spray.
As far as I know, she put it onto a tea towel or a towel and just inhaled it, put it up to her mouth and just inhaled it.
Rebecca's mum Christine was just 2 doors up visiting a friend when her 2 younger daughters ran to tell her Rebecca wasn't well. The 12-year-old had staggered from the family home and collapsed out the front. She was cold and frothing at the mouth. In a reaction to the propellant from the can, Rebecca's lungs were starved of oxygen and she suffered a cardiac arrest and died in hospital a short time later.
I was shocked. I still can't believe it. I just hope people would take note, you know. If other kids are using it, please take note. This is what happens. A young girl.
Thousands of people are expected to head for the Hunter River town of Morpeth near Maitland during its 2-day jazz festival. As well as the traditional Dixieland and preservation jazz, there's also contemporary sounds. The festival suffered a setback a few years ago when a historic steam train carrying jazz enthusiasts from Sydney was involved in a fatal collision with a commuter service. At 10 tomorrow morning, a jazz funeral march will be held in remembrance of those who died.
Paul Smith's job is to highlight a problem he says we simply cannot afford to ignore.
It has to be done now, not leave it down the track. It has to be done now.
Salinity in our soils costs agriculture and the hunter millions of dollars in lost production. This region is one of the worst in the country. The main reason, hundreds of thousands of years ago, these valleys were giant seabeds.
The problem's related to the geology of the area. A lot of the geology of the Hunter Valley comes from marine sediment, so it's naturally saline.
Farming practices of clearing trees and coal mines releasing water into the rivers has worsened the situation. In a first for the region, Paul Smith has been appointed to study the problems of salinity and make farmers in particular aware of the issue and chart a program to save the area. It's indicative of the government's concern that such a position has been created to save our landscapes from becoming moonscapes. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Belinda Jane Armstrong entered a plea of not guilty when she appeared in Wallsend Court. Her de facto, Mark Thomas Gorman, pleaded guilty to 2 charges, child abuse and causing grievous bodily harm by a negligent act. The charges against the pair relate to an incident on the 5th of May when an 18-month-old girl was scalded. In a statement tendered to the court, it's alleged Gorman decided to bath the child because she'd soiled her nappy. He claims the lighting in the bathroom was poor and the tap was mistakenly turned to hot. He later heard the child screaming and found she had burns to her lower body, legs, arms and stomach. The statement goes on to say he then wiped what appeared to be wet toilet paper from the child's legs, only to find that it was peeling skin. The child was taken to hospital by Gorman's mother 5 hours after the scalding. Doctors found she was in a near-death state and was rushed to a Sydney hospital where she remains in a critical condition with serious burns to 50% of her body. Belinda Armstrong's version of events, however, differ. She has told police the child tipped a bucket of water on herself. Asking for a suppression order on the case, counsel for the pair, Margaret Wells, presented this letter to the court, which has been distributed around Barnsley. She said her clients fear for their safety. Magistrate Brown ordered that the child's identity be suppressed. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
The world's experts in lead control are meeting in Newcastle for a 3-day conference. Speakers from Australia, America, Asia and Europe. One of the greatest lead contamination problems for cities is from exhaust fumes. Professor Tony McMichael, an Australian working at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, believes politicians in Canberra aren't doing enough to convert all our vehicles to lead-free petrol.
I don't think we're moving fast enough. When we look at what's happened in North America or in most countries in Europe, it's quite clear that governments can move to get lead out of petrol.
Research work shows lead can also be transmitted through old paint or living near lead smelters. Professor McMichael says young children are at risk. Lead contamination can cut IQ levels by up to 3%.
Australia's primary school children might have lost something like 1 or 2 million points of IQ.
Blood pressure can also be increased. The conference continues tomorrow. Peter Ryan, NBN News.